Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for checking out our latest long-range forecast here. Michael Clark with BAMWX.com, the weather portal. A lot to discuss today as we're going to try and kind of lay out the risks going forward, both for the short term and trying to find out what exactly August has in store. And what we would like to do is just kind of share that with you, share the thought process of, what are we looking at? What do we think is going to happen here as we rumble into August? And we've got a lot to dissect. We want to get right into it. So First and foremost is the 1 week difference in the column relative soil moisture percentage. And you can see we've definitely seen a depletion of soil moisture here as we've been dealing with these higher evaporative transpiration rates here as of recently, and we're really gonna ramp those up here getting into the weekend and into next week as a drier and warmer pattern settles in. And I think this map really tells us a lot in terms of just what we've lost in this week and what we may lose again next week. All right, now let's keep it into perspective, though. Okay, let's make sure we're looking at this with a clear lens and non-biased look at things. If you look at this month to date, a large portion of the U.S., eastern U.S., and a large portion of the main growing regions here in the central U.S. have actually been below normal in temperatures, which was a much needed break from some of the hottest observations in June on record, especially for the northwestern third of the Corn Belt. Precipitation, a little bit of a different story, but there has been rain at least. Obviously, areas that haven't seen the rain are the northern third kind of the ag belt here. So, both corn and soybeans up here for sure. It has not been a widespread, just tons of rain in the pattern, if you will. And we look at the primary growing regions, we're kind of right in through here in terms of bigger production areas. There have been beneficial rains for many people. There have been many areas that haven't had beneficial rains as well. You look at this map and you could probably say it's 50-50 if we're looking at this through a non-biased lens, is the best way you could describe that. It's in the short term where my concerns mount. You can look at the upper level pattern European model. We've targeted this period since late June. And really as we get into late weekend, into Monday, the heat's really going to fire up. This is Monday afternoon, 594 decameter ridge, and big heat here in the central and western plains. Okay? The heat will flex its muscles, if you will, and certainly be prevalent here. I'll tell you what, Tuesday afternoon, this is impressive. 597 decameter ridge, 594 sprawls out from a large portion of the country. And you get gradients like this, and then you start looking at possibly significant thunderstorm clusters that'll ride the northwestern or the northeastern periphery of this ridge. This feature down here as well acting to pump up this ridge, pump up the heights, and it's certainly an impressive heat wave that's gonna grip the central U.S. here next week. That's Tuesday. We'll take you out to Wednesday. It's just the European really aggressive with some intense heat and little to no precipitation next week in this time frame. We go out to Thursday. We start to see this trough come in, this backdoor trough come in, and offer some significant relief late next week into the weekend for the eastern U.S. That can be thanks in part to some typhoon activity in the western Pacific that has altered the jet stream and allowed this front to come in. And boy, I tell you, you talk about a dipole or two different worlds. The Northeast and the Pacific Northwest late next week are going to be in two totally different planets in terms of temperatures and just weather in general. When you look at this here, you look at these temperatures, and it's going to be pretty different, in terms of who's dealing with what and just how intense this is. 60s here and upper 100s again in the PNW Central Plains, still holding on to the 90s, still holding on to the 90s. Let's look at our high temp forecast here in terms of this day by day. Okay, highs for today mid to upper 90s, large portion of the central western belt. Highs for Saturday, mid 90s across much of the area here. Sunday, again, multiple, mid 90-degree highs. These are not anything that are incredibly out of the ordinary by any means. When you look at the departure, the departure from normal, they are above normal though. Okay, I know the old adage is it always gets hot in the summer. I get it. It does get hot in the summer. I think everybody knows that by now. But in terms of departures from normal, those things do matter. And when you start getting 100-degree heat in areas that are already dry, it makes for difficult conditions. Tuesday, it really ramps up. Mid to upper 90s, Iowa west, the entire Central Plains here. A lot of crop in this region here across the entire Central Plains all the way down to Texas. Highs for Wednesday, it continues. 100s creep into Iowa and Nebraska. This here, by Wednesday into Thursday, we're really going to start to see whatever stress is out there to the crop that's probably going to really surface come Wednesday, Thursday of next week, as we have these very, very warm temperatures. In the 6 to 10, the front comes through and does offer a relief or a reprieve from the intense heat. Okay, this is what we're watching, and this is the trend in the model data. Taking that 7-day forecast, looking at it back on day 10, taking the old day 10, rolling it into day 7. We note this front that is worked in. And that will be good for the eastern belt, the eastern U.S., northeast, as that front works in cooler temperatures. It's also going to allow that ridge to pull back and possibly set up in the 7 to 14 day for a northwest flow pattern to deliver rain and thunderstorm clusters. These are not going to be everybody gets the rain. It's going to kind of be one of those patterns where it's boom or bust, if you will. But you can see the trend certainly supports that pullback, that placement a little further west and southwest, and would set up the northwest flow aloft. The concern would be some possibly strong thunderstorm clusters, some damaging thunderstorm clusters with an intense heat ridge like that. The 1 to 7 day precipitation forecast, latest GFS shown very simply put here, it's dry for the most part. I mean, you're not looking at any beneficial rains. Now, the week 2, you can see exactly what the model's doing. Don't take this verbatim. Take it as an idea. But when we see the origin start skinny and go wide like this, that's where you see a good indication of northwest flow, MCSs, or possibly even a derecho or two out of this. You can't rule that out in a pattern like this. Obviously, we can't say one way or the other, but you get the point here. The official Week 1 and Week 2 forecast products, again, Week 1 obviously very dry. Week 2, I tell you what, there's pretty good support in this period, which matches the forecast thinking analogs based on the MJO and the SOI. Precipitation risks in this time frame will likely come from the damaging clusters of storms. High amounts of instability and stuff built underneath these ridges, and you kind of flow them around the periphery of it. The risk here is going to be for Week 2, how strong is the ridge and where exactly is it? That's going to be the primary concern here, because if it's stronger, you're drier in here. If it's weaker, you're wetter in here, across the top. So certainly something to keep in mind there. It's quite a bit different from last year in terms of we had a very wet pattern for a lot of us here in the eastern U.S. But that's kind of the official thought process right now. Definitely a risk here at thunderstorm clusters. And even some of us are going to get beneficial rains. It's not like it's going to be an incredibly dry week. It's been much drier before. So that's encouraging. Week 1 and Week 2 temps, again, obviously very warm this week. We beat that into the ground. This is what happened last year, though, in 2020. We had a big cold front come through in August and really knocked a lot of the central U.S. Heat out and brought in some cooler temperatures. The difference between this year and 2020 is that front's going to be centered much further off to the east for now, at least. And the warmer conditions are going to keep their hold here on the central U.S., especially the western 50% of the ag belt. That's the thought process here in terms of our official forecast products. Okay. Beyond Week 2, getting out into day 15, we've got some discrepancies. Canadian ensemble top left, we see this trough trying to work in. European ensemble here, so also seeing a trough work in. The GFS ensemble is weaker with the suggestion, a little bit of a weak trough up in here, but more prevalent with a ridge, and so is the GFS operational model. Does have a trough in here a little bit. Now, mind you, the GFS did trend stronger with the trough from the roll forward here recently. We can't always base future model performance off past model performance. It doesn't really work that way, but just something that's perspective there. But regardless, the top two charts, they agree with our idea. We do have an August pullback. We were on Chip Flory the other day. We talked about it on on AgriTalk, and we've talked about it here multiple times, that we are going to have a pullback or a relaxation in the intense heat and the lack of rain. The question is going to be exactly how long does that last, where does it go? And a lot of it's based on the MJO forecast, okay? The MJO forecast here from Mike Ventrese's site, the free site here. Look at this great information you can access. But this is just kind of a depiction of the tropical forcing, the MJO, the upward, the rising and the sinking air across the equatorial Pacific Ocean. We're definitely getting into that MJO phase 5 and 6. We're definitely going to go 7, 8, and 1. And we're going to see this move across the Pacific. That's going to be a key pattern indicator or dictation going forward, not only for our weather, but the weather in the Atlantic. As this gets closer into the MDR and the Atlantic, we expect tropical activity to uptick as well into August. So here's what this looks like. As we get into August, we have this positive SOI. We have a strongly positive SOI, very strong indication of a La Nina. And we're seeing the response to this starting to take place. But the MJO 7 and 8 positive SOI into August since 2000, it's not a very wet pattern, okay? It's much better here, all right? Maybe from tropical moisture or thunderstorm activity clusters over the top. But overall, generally, that pattern would yield drier conditions, west, wetter, east. That's nothing new. That's nothing new at all. Now, as we got into MJO phase 1, what may happen here is we may return back to more ridging through here, possibly further back west just based on current drought conditions, and we see this northwest flow thunderstorm cluster risk across the top. It's clear as day here. You can see this. The MJO phase 1 is a warmer and drier phase. All right, so we know this, and what we need to look at now are what is our August pattern telling us? What are some of the correlations, the global teleconnections telling us? Do we have support in the thought process? So we looked at the 3 biggest pattern drivers right now, in our opinions, that are making, that have the most anomalous readings. The SOI for one, 30, 90-day average daily driving or running SOI just positive. Okay, the positive SOI correlation for August would suggest the warmest temperatures are located here. That's from 2000 to 2020. Overall, it's a warm pattern, though. You can see that. The negative ENSO correlation. So ENSO 3.4 is dropping. The correlation suggests the primary location of the ridge would be centered here. All right, and then you look at the August PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, looking at water temperatures in the North Pacific. It's the most negative it's been at this time since 2012. Okay, that's no means. I'm not comparing this drought to 2012. I'm not saying it's 2012. Please do not put words in my mouth. I'm just simply saying the PDO is the lowest it's been since 2012. Okay, its correlation for the warmest air is in through here. And so when we look at these, when we attempt to connect the dots, it gives us a good idea of what may be coming. There's definitely a risk for warmer weather, here and points west, right? This obviously being the outlier. We've got to keep some attention on this because the ENSO 3.4 is certainly dropping. And then looking at the PDO, that's a strong correlation for warm temperatures to continue up in here, which the CFS is picking up on this. So, with that being said, here's the CFS trend, the monthly CFS running out to August. Note what's happened here. Note in the last couple of runs, we've seen a little bit of pickup here, warmer conditions here, but still keeping it cool here in the east and the south. I don't hate that. I don't think that's a horrible forecast whatsoever. The drier trend is what's a little bit more noteworthy to me, is at one point these all were pretty wet weather models, pretty wet runs, if you will, and then we've started to see dryness surface. The latest run today has a pretty dry forecast here in August, right? So at some point, the rubber has to meet the road. We understand that, and that's what we're going to do. Week 3 and 4, GEFS and European, they're both pretty similar, right? They both have this idea that it can be wetter east in weeks 3 and 4, and I don't disagree. I think it can be wet in here, even as far as East Iowa, eastern Minnesota at times. The areas that still don't have big above normal precip signals are the areas that haven't had it the entire time. A lot of persistence here in the forecast heading into August, perhaps. The temperature outlook. The European probably doing better. It's got this cool east week 3, warms it back up into week 4. Regardless, you understand this here is the same. Okay, the GFS is really turning up the heat here in week 3 and 4 based on its weekly product. It's got a little bit of a warm bias, but at least it has had. So where the rubber meets the road, our week 3 and 4 forecast here. Here's I think the biggest thing. You can obviously see the map. These maps are great. Great job here by the team. My biggest thing, I want to talk about the risk. My risk is, I believe it can be warmer in here. Possibly. If there's a potential for this forecast to fail, it would be in here. It would be warmer, possibly even all this, right? And then I believe that it's possible for a time in August, it could end up drier here. A lot of that's going to depend on the tropical activity, okay? So that's kind of the thought process, especially if MJO phase 1 comes in and just looking at the correlations, looking at some of the model data. There is a time where there could be some ridging here further east if those correlations play out. So that's kind of that's the best I got today. Difficult forecast into August, trying to give it to you again, no bias here, best we can, and give you the best possible idea. If you have questions, hit the chat button in the app, shoot us an email. We're happy to help you. Hope you have a blessed weekend.